Hello, welcome to this week's edition of the MMA Freak Fighter of the Week. I'm Matt Salzer. So today, or this week, we had... It's like, I can't pick a Fighter of the Week. I honestly want to try and make a list of the top 10 fighters of the week, but I'm just going to go with fighters for every event because all the fights were so close and I don't want to try and figure things out until the end of the month. So anyways, the first event was Professional Fighters League 1. The rebranded World Series of Fighting put on what they advertised as the first event. I didn't see any of their other Professional Fighters League's event last year. But they put it on, and the format is that during the summer, they're going to have 2 fights a fighter, and based on that, they get a score based on what, you know, like whether you can finish the fight in the first round or not. And based on that scoring system, the top I think it's 8 fighters out of 12 per weight class will go into a playoff tournament in the fall that's going to lead to champions being crowned in on New Year's Eve, of all things. And so anyways, just a few of the highlights. Andre Harris did a phenomenal job basically imposing his will on this. I think they called him like a Kazakh Chinese fighter or something like that. He's basically a minority fighter in China. Lance Palmer submitted Berkhalat Magomedov. Timur Valiev fought a decision against Max Loga. Alex Nicholson versus Jake Huan. That, you know, he, I mean, what can I say? He need the guy with like just perfect timing. So, but yeah, it was definitely a good event. These guys obviously, with the motivation, they obviously have something to prove. There's some new guys in the mix of what has been basically a pool of World Series of Fighting fighters. I'm just not sure how in the long term this is going to work, and especially when a guy like Andre Harrison, who is the featherweight fighter, he's still having to fight for his title, and Berkhalat Magomedov, he's the bantamweight fighter. I'm not sure how exactly this format will work in the long term. I know that they're trying to, create something notable, something different, but I genuinely don't know how this format would work. I mean, we're talking, and Bellator eventually just couldn't keep their tournament format when they had fall seasons, the spring seasons, and the summer tournament and stuff like that. Bellator just couldn't do it. They are now a traditional. They're now more of a traditional MMA promotion, or Strikeforce 2.0, as I like to call them. But it should definitely be interesting. It should definitely be interesting how the Professional Fighters League progresses from here. Can they make this work? I have no idea. We'll just have to wait and see how it goes. And something I liked is that they kept Bas Rutten. He's just such an animated guy. There's one thing they did right, that it was that. And they also signed Randy Couture. I'm not sure what happened with Randy Couture's contract or his affiliation with Spike. But with Bellator, I mean, they just have so many personalities there. I'm still glad to see Randy Couture getting to that opportunity just the same. Then Legacy Fighting Alliance, again, blew me out of the water. It's just the number of fighters. You know, Professional Fighters League and Legacy Fighting Alliance, they're supposed to be second-tier promotions. They're not supposed to be on par with the UFC. But these were some darn good fights. I've seen better fights in these two events than I've seen on, like, UFC pay-per-views. And UFC pay-per-views are supposed to be the pinnacle. And here these second-tier promotions are putting on good fights. So, Legacy Fighting Alliance... Oh, yeah. Also, so for Professional Fighters League, I am going to make the Fighter of the Week... I'm going to make the Fighter of the Week for that Timur Valiev, who had that was one of the best fights. And then the Alex Nicholson knockout of Jake Huan is going to be the knockout of the night for those two. Those are knockouts of the knockout and Fighter of the Week is what I'm doing there, or Fighter of for the event basically. Then for Legacy Fighting Alliance, so some recaps. Alexander Almeida. No, wait, that's the wrong thing. Again, this a lot of these guys are progressing. Derek Krantz decision against Cassius K. That was good. Jaleel Willis versus Chijum Erwin Davis. Jamie Navarro decision of Katie Collins. And then, okay, we're getting to some of the better fights. Josh Marsh's knockout of T.J. Britton's. That was another good knockout right there. I'm going to make out the knockout of the night for that. And then Charles TKO of that was a good one too. And then Lucas Clay's decision of Mike Breeden. Again, that was a good fight. And also the Derek Krantz Cassius Kane fight was also a good fight. So that was that. And then we had UFC 225. UFC 225. The main event delivered. It's just unfortunate that it wasn't for the title. But you know, it's like you either need to retire, you need to make weight, or you need to go up a weight class. Is what it really comes down to for Yoel Romero. You know, with his losing weight. And then Colby Covington. I honestly was not thinking Colby Covington was going to win, because based on his the resume of fighters that he beat Damian Maia, but he doesn't. If you look at the list of opponents, they aren't really that impressive. They're average fighters. And yet here he was getting an interim title shot against Rafael Dos Anjos, and I honestly was thinking, this kid's, you know, this kid hasn't faced the competition. I really didn't expect that. And then he comes in and he just smothers Rafael for 5 rounds and wins the interim title. And Tyrone is even having doubts about whether he publicly expressing doubts that he can beat Colby Covington. It's just that was a good fight. And then something I should note is, you know, the Chicago crowd was not happy with Robert Whittaker getting the win against Yoel Romero. Here's the thing with that. Yoel took the 3rd and he took the 5th rounds. The decisive, well, if you're listening to 2 out of the 3 judges, was a split decision. One judge saw it for Yoel Romero. But from what I saw and from what most experts say, those are the 2 rounds he took. And even if you called the 5th round a 10-8 round, which I do not believe it was a 10-8 round, Romero was not dominating the entire round. Even if you call it a 10-8 round, then it still would have been 47-47. It would have been a draw. It would not have been a win. It would not have been a decisive win. So, yeah, and also you can't judge a fight by the final round. You cannot judge a fight by the final round. So I think that the crowd boos was pretty unwarranted, but it's a crowd versus an analyst. Clearly different there. Then Holly Holm, who out-wrestled Megan Anderson. I honestly thought Holly was kind of on a downhill path. I honestly didn't think that she was going to win this. But that kind of brings in a little bit of a problem. The whole point of... I don't think Megan should have gotten a straight... should have gotten a title contender fight. I think if they really wanted to hype her and put her up against Cyborg, which was the whole point, Megan is not a bantamweight. She is a featherweight. She's Cyborg's weight class. If this was the point, they did the wrong thing in matching her against Holly Holm, because they knew that they would risk losing, and she lost. And like I said, Holly was very impressive, but she says she wants another crack at bantamweight. Now, of note, she has not fought Amanda Nunes yet. She has not fought Amanda Nunes. She fought Cyborg and went the whole 5 rounds and looked like crap afterwards, but she fought Cyborg for 5 rounds. How many fighters can say they fought Cyborg for 5 rounds? So that was good for Holly Holm. And then probably one of the more bizarre fights I've ever seen, aside from the more obvious one. But the bizarre fight between Tai Tuivasa and Andrei Arlovsky. Now, Tai Tuivasa definitely won. The fight itself was not bizarre. It was what happened before and after that was bizarre. Tai Tuivasa comes into Celine Dion, My Heart Will Go On. He goes into Titanic and is into it. It's like, I heard this, I'm just like, what's going on here? I mean, the CM Punk fight had just happened, so I'm just like, what in God's name is going on here? So you had that fight, and you had that happen before the fight, and then after the fight, he said to Joe Rogan, "I'm going to, if I win, I'm gonna drink beer out of a shoe." He goes to a fan, gets his shoe, pours beer in it, and drinks out of the shoe. It was just. Oh, he's an interesting guy. Tai Tuivasa's an interesting guy. Then you had the stinker, a fight that shouldn't even take place on television. It shouldn't have been taking place in the UFC prelims, let alone the pay-per-view card. But here it was, CM Punk versus Mike Jackson, and it was just so sloppy. I keep saying this. This reminded me of Kimbo Slice versus Dada 5000 in Bellator. But you expect that because they're 2 street fighters. You don't expect this in the UFC. The UFC was supposed to have done away with freak show fights years ago. Like, literally years. It's been over a year since CM Punk fight Mickey Gall, but then you had this happen. Mike Jackson was horrible. Dana White, has said he needs to go back to do whatever he was. It's just, how did this guy? Like, I don't see a place in the sport for Mike Jackson, let alone CM Punk. Mike Jackson was just bad. I can tell you right now, I could be either of those guys. I am fat and out of shape right now. I am a natural flyweight. I could be either of those guys easily. This was just bad. Like, it's like, I'm not even sure if it's even worth it to stress over it anymore. But yeah, it was. I mean, props for getting into the octagon. But CM Punk, you're a good pro wrestler. You need to go back to pro wrestling. Go do an all-in event. Match up with Cody Rhodes. Go to New Japan. Go to TNA. Go to one of those secondary promotions. Don't do this. You're good at pro wrestling. You're not good at this. You're never gonna be good at this. It's just I'm sorry. Like I said, I could beat you. And I'm a fat flyweight. So anyways, yeah, so then a very good fight, which was the last prelim fight, was Curtis Blaydes TKOing via elbows Alistair Overeem. Overeem goes on this constant up and down cycle. It's like he'll work his way up to a title. It's like he'll work his way up to a title shot or title fight, and then he'll get. The problem is he's got a glass chin. He's a great kickboxer. He's by far a great kickboxer, but he's got a glass chin, and that's not a good thing when you're talking about flyweights. And Andrei Arlovsky may have. Andrei Arlovsky, realistically, when he was the UFC champion, it was a weak weight class. Same with Tim Sylvia. Those guys traded back and forth. It was a weak heavyweight class at the time. I mean, these guys just, he's revamped himself. I mean, congrats to eventually getting back into the UFC, but, I'm switching around a little bit. So, Curtis Blaydes did very well. He's going into it. And then you saw Claudia Castaneda versus... No, that's not Castaneda. I'm thinking of somebody else. Claudia Gadelha. I do not know how I even made that mistake. That is embarrassing. Claudia Gadelha versus Carla Esparza. This is, Carla was a former Invicta champion, the first UFC strawweight champion, but it's just, here's a problem. She's a small strawweight. She won during this time when she was the more skilled person. The skill level has changed since then. I genuinely don't think she has a play. She could maybe be like a middle range, maybe even middle range, maybe even gatekeeper status in the UFC. But I realistically, she's an atomweight. I just don't see her recapturing that title. This is one of those things where I was talking about, Andrei Arlovsky win the UFC championship once upon a time. This is the same thing. Carla Esparza, and I hate to be bashing a fellow wrestler like that, but I just don't. The skill level and the size of the fighters has just changed. The game has changed. I don't think she's going to really get anywhere. Also of note with UFC 225, when I was, mentioning it, was that speaking of the changing of the game, Ronda Rousey was announced as being officially inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. This was long coming. She's, you would expect her to be inducted into any kind of MMA Hall of Fame. She's in the MMA Freak Hall of Fame. I think she was in like one of the first 2 classes, maybe even 3. But yeah, it's not surprising. It's not surprising. She very much deserves it. MMA or women in the UFC is a direct result of Ronda Rousey. She came in with just the charisma and the spunkiness and the skill level that was able to bring it up to there. The reason why there is women in the UFC is because of Ronda Rousey, and arguably even where the UFC is now is because of Ronda Rousey, because she launched that mainstream success. It's just it's as much as she's been plagued with, controversies and, she's in pro wrestling now and whatnot. The fact of the matter is the MMA would not be where it is right now without Ronda Rousey. She's one of those key pivotal pivotal figures. So this is well deserved. I'd say this is well deserved. Congrats. It was gonna happen. We all knew that. But it is genuinely well deserved. This isn't one of those political things. This is genuinely, she deserves it. Regardless of whether she ever comes into MMA again or not. We're here right now talking about stuff like that because of Ronda Rousey. You cannot argue about that. So, then, okay, so let's talk about that. And really, it's like, I don't really want to talk about any more of the prelims. Also note, so the fight of the fight of the night for UFC 225, I am placing with the Robert Whittaker Yoel Romero fight. I'm essentially agreeing with Dana White on this one. Yeah, it was a good fight. It was definitely a good fight. Then the knockout of the night, I am giving to Overeem versus Bladis, which Bladis won because I think he did pretty well on that. So that's my review of the week. We're getting a little bit of a downtime in terms of major MMA. There's still other MMA going on in terms of the international circuit. There is Absolute Championship Berkut 88, and there's a ONE FC event. And also of note is that you have the UFC Contenders series going on, which is basically a summer weekly version of The Ultimate Fighter, where fighters are trying to get into the UFC. And of note, this is long overdue, Nick Newell. He hasn't officially been announced yet, but he was advertised, so he's supposed to be on one of the events. And this is not surprising. He was once in a he actually tried out for the Ultimate Fighter. This is basically an equivalent of it. I hope he gets in. And he would make history with. And it's not like Dana White. I'm sure that Dana White's had his eye on him for a while if he was considering him for the Ultimate Fighter. So, so yeah, that's it. So yeah, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.